In this episode of Dentside Depot, we're going to take a look at never before seen footage of my first Dentside Ford truck restoration that took place starting back in the mid 90s. So stay tuned as we check out my very first truck, the restoration that I did on it, all the mistakes that I made, and where this truck is at today. The story begins in 1996 when my father picked me up from school one day and said, "I want to take you to go look at something." Well, it turned out that this 1979 Ford F-150 was sitting on the corner for sale on a grass lot, and he said, "Would you like this truck?" And I said, "Absolutely, let's buy it." I think the price was $1,300. We called the gentleman that had put the sticker on the side of the truck selling it, and before you know it, a few days later, the truck was ours, and eventually our first restoration project between father and son would begin. And that is this truck that you see right here, a blue 1979 F-150 trailer special with white tape stripes and factory bullet hole wheels. The truck was equipped with a 302 V8 engine, but it did not run very good at all. Before we get into the restoration on this truck, let's take a quick look at the Marti report and all the cool options that it actually had. Now, believe it or not, I did not actually get the Marti report on this truck until about last year, so I did not even know many of the things that this truck had from the factory. We can see it had a 302 V8. It was built at the Mahwah plant. It had a 325 track lock rear. It also had tilt wheel. It was a dark blue metallic paint with a blue vinyl interior. And it also had some pretty cool options, such as white tape stripes, tilt steering wheel, as I previously mentioned, handling package. It was a trailer special truck with AM/FM stereo radio. Of course, it had tinted glass because it also had AC. It had factory aluminum styled wheels, convenience group, and one thing that I do not personally like is the rocker panel moldings. But it was a Ranger XLT truck that was sold in Quakertown, Pennsylvania, and it was a truck that I drove for decades. So now let's get into the restoration of this truck, and I can still remember starting with the interior, and I probably made Home Depot a lot of money in blue tape, taping off the interior to paint everything. I had no idea what I was doing. Yes, this is a picture of me from about 30 years ago at this point. And I started out by painting the interior with blue spray paint from Home Depot. And it really didn't come out that bad, but obviously that was definitely not the way to do it. And here you can see the very impressive before and after photos of the interior restoration. And you can see on the floor in the lower right hand corner that I filled the floors up with Bondo, obviously having no idea that that was definitely not the right way to do things. But again, I was a kid and I had really no clue as to what I was doing at all. As we were working on the interior, eventually we wanted to get the engine done. Now, of course, in this time period, I did not know how to change an engine, and my dad was a general contractor, so he did not know how to do that either. So we worked out a deal with this local Texaco station that we would paint the station or repaint the gas station, and one weekend they would change the engine for us, and that's exactly what happened. So the truck was dropped off, and obviously you can see they removed the front clip to eventually pull the old 302 out that had been sitting in there for about 20 years at this time period. Here we can see the 302 being lifted out for the very first time, and now the engine bay is completely empty, and I can still remember that they rattle can sprayed the firewall, and I thought that was really cool when I saw that they took the extra time to do that. The replacement engine that we got came from, I believe, Summit Racing, if I remember correctly. It was a 302 long block, and it came with a new carburetor, and we also got some sweet headers for it. We put all the factory brackets back on the truck, of course, replaced the power steering pump, the hoses, and everything else. But it was a very stock, mild build with nothing really crazy. We just wanted a good running truck. And then you can see a few days later, the new engine was installed to my very delight. And it was just one of the coolest things that I could remember as a kid, just having a truck that ran terrible and the engine barely ran at all, and then having a brand new engine that started up every single time and just sounded so very good. So then me, my dad, my uncle, and my cousin continued with doing things like taking off the bed, sanding down the frame. We got new exhaust installed. We got new tires for the truck. They were Goodyear Eagle GT2s, and I can remember the rear tires were bigger than the front tires. I think it was 275 in the rear and 245 in the front, and I just thought that was so cool to have the big tires on the back of the truck. And you can see we just sanded down the frame with wire wheels, and we just hit it with Rust-Oleum spray paint and everything else. We got these really cool coilover style looking load bearing shocks through there. I thought that was a really cool looking thing. But you can see this was just a very, very amateur style restoration project, but nonetheless, I thought it was awesome at the time for sure. You can see me here in the background after a long day of working on the truck. I think every single weekend I spent probably 20 hours on this truck trying to get it as nice as I could. I can still remember sanding down the inside of the bed and painting it gloss black, which is what I really wanted to do. And I can also remember sanding down the bumper and finding chrome paint at Home Depot and painting it chrome, and I was definitely really proud of that. Looking at the rear of the truck, we can see that it has the trailer special emblem on the rear. Here's a really cool picture because in the background you can see my father's 1989 F-250 that he had. It was black and silver with a red pinstripe going down, and we had a lot of good times in that truck, driving it all over the country, taking it fishing and everything else, and those were definitely pretty good times. Here you can see, obviously, we did not know what we were doing. The cab corners were filled in with Bondo. The wheel wells were filled in with Bondo. The top of the cab over the drip rails was filled in with Bondo, and all of that would lead to eventually what you're going to see here at the end. And at this point, we're getting ready for the truck to be painted, and you can see my father's Buick Regal in the background. That was another great memory as a kid. And here I am making some sort of an adjustment underneath the truck. I don't remember what I was doing, but the truck was only a few days away at this point from going off to getting paint. And here the truck is in the garage. We have all the trim off. You can see all of the Bondo on the rear of the truck on the bed. Just tons and tons of Bondo. Definitely take note of that for later on, because I'm going to show you what the result of this Bondo was 25 years later, and it was definitely not good. And here you can see we now have the tailgate off, the bumper off, and pretty much everything ready to go. At this point, it's about to be driven off to get painted for the very first time. And again, you can see my dad's F-250 in the background as well. Now, unfortunately, I only have one picture of the truck after it was completely painted and looking nice, and I'll show that picture at the end. But here's the truck 25 years later, and I used this truck to build my house. All of the Bondo here on the sides had popped out of the bed. This is 25 years later from the picture that you just saw. So obviously you do not want to repair a truck with Bondo. That's definitely not the right way to do it. And you can see the results of that all this time later. But me and my dad used this truck for decades and decades and decades to build other people's houses. I built my house with this truck. I loaded 42 trees in the back of that truck when I bought my property and took them all down myself. And that was definitely a ton of work, and that truck did all of that work on its own. Here's one of the very last pictures I have of the truck. My cousin drove out to Kentucky and picked up a freewheeling roll bar for me and then brought it back, and this was me picking up the roll bar to put it in the truck, and I thought that was just so cool to see a roll bar in it. Here is the second to last picture that I have of the truck before its eventual demise, and the purpose of this picture here is I took the bed off that was filled with all the Bondo because I was driving down to the city to pick up another bed that was a little bit better, so I devised this funny looking system here of mud flaps and taillights so I could drive there, put the bed on the truck, not have another bed to take off, and that was a pretty funny day driving down and getting it because it was bouncing all over the place like that. And then unfortunately, this is the very last picture that I have of the truck, and I know you're probably wondering, well, why did I completely dismantle it like this and basically get rid of everything? And it's because the truck was already rusty before we started the restoration on it, and the way we did it, filling everything in with Bondo, just made everything worse. There was literally nothing left of this truck. By the time this picture was taken in 2020, I believe it was, there was just absolutely nothing left of this truck from a body standpoint. Every single body panel on this truck was completely rusted out. There was nothing that could be repaired. It's just everything would have had to been replaced, so it just wasn't worth it. So my decision was to pull all the good parts off the truck, put them in other trucks that I have and still have, and obviously keep the door tag, the buck tag, the title, and everything else. So when I decide to redo the truck, I have all of that stuff to restore it again one day the right way, which is a project I'd like to undertake at some point in the very distant future. And here is the only picture that I have of the truck after it was painted and still looking really, really good, because the Bondo killed the truck pretty quickly even after it was painted because we just didn't do it the right way. But this is my dad with his best friend and his Chevelle, and he was very, very proud of the work that we did on this truck. And although we didn't do it the right way because we didn't really know what we were doing and parts were not really available back then, it was pretty much the J.C. Whitney catalog or the junkyard were pretty much your only two options. But we were proud of the truck that we did. We had a lot of good times with the truck, and obviously that was the truck that would eventually start Dentside Depot today, that really brewed my love for not only restoring classic vehicles, but especially Dentside Ford trucks. So I wanted to share this video today just to show the importance of spending time with your family, restoring classic trucks, because it really can change your life for the positive. And I hope to one day bring this truck back to life again, obviously being a reproduction of a truck that's no longer around. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed this look back in time episode of Dentside Depot. Remember to like and subscribe, and always keep restoring those classic trucks.